In today's episode, we're looking at hunters who were eaten alive by their own animals. From a tiger moving through Bangladesh's mangrove swamps, tracking poachers, to a man whose illegal grizzly hunt ended the moment his rifle let him down. It was April 19th, 2014, when the morning tide began flooding the narrow channels of the Sundarbans mangrove forest along the Bangladesh coast. The rising pre-monsoon tides had swollen the waterways, creating a maze of muddy channels and tangled root systems that stretched for miles. The air was thick with humidity, and the only sounds were the distant calls of kingfishers and the soft lapping of water against exposed roots. For Qadir Hossain, a 34-year-old former honey collector from the village of Satkira, these treacherous swamps represented opportunity rather than danger. Qadir had worked as a legitimate honey collector for nearly a decade before declining bee populations made the trade unsustainable. The transition to tiger poaching had been gradual but inevitable. A single tiger's skin could fetch up to $15,000 through the right connections in Dhaka, enough to support his extended family for 2 years. He had completed 3 successful expeditions over the previous 18 months, each time returning undetected with his illegal cargo. The money had transformed his family's circumstances, and stepping away from the trade felt impossible. His partner, Rashid Mullah, was a 29-year-old fisherman whose knowledge of the tidal patterns made him invaluable for navigating the dangerous channels. The two men had departed before dawn, paddling a narrow wooden boat deep into restricted territory where ranger patrols were infrequent. Their target was a known tiger trail near a freshwater stream approximately 6 miles from the nearest ranger station. The journey had taken them through increasingly narrow waterways where the mangrove canopy closed overhead and filtered the light into dim green shadows. The plan was straightforward. They would position themselves along the trail during high tide when tigers often moved between hunting territories, wait for an opportunity, take the shot, and retreat before anyone discovered the kill. Qadir carried a modified rifle wrapped in waterproof cloth, while Rashid handled navigation and served as lookout. Bengal tigers are apex predators uniquely adapted to the Sundarbans mangrove environment. Adult males in the Sundarbans typically weigh between 300 and 400 pounds, smaller than mainland tigers due to the harsh mangrove habitat, and can measure over 9 feet in length. Unlike tigers in other regions, Sundarbans tigers hunt humans with surprising frequency, responsible for multiple fatal attacks each year across the delta. These tigers use water as cover, approaching prey silently through shallow channels where their striped coats blend with the shadows of mangrove roots. Their extremely powerful jaws are capable of crushing bone, typically targeting the throat to suffocate prey, or crushing the neck to cause rapid death. The two men had been waiting motionless for over 3 hours, the heat and mosquitoes testing their patience, when Rashid spotted fresh pug marks in the mud along the stream bank, roughly 40 feet away. The tracks indicated a large male, likely the same animal they had observed signs of during previous reconnaissance. Qadir carefully unwrapped his rifle, checking that the action remained dry as he positioned himself for a clear shot across the narrow channel. His hands were steady from experience, but his pulse quickened at the sight of the tracks. The animal was close. What neither man realized was that the tiger had already detected their presence. The animal had been moving parallel to their position through shallow water on the opposite bank, using the dense mangrove cover to mask its approach. The tiger moved nearly silent through the shallows, each massive paw placed deliberately to create minimal disturbance in the water. Occasionally, the animal paused, motionless, its eyes locked on the 2 figures in the boat, before advancing again through the tangled roots. Qadir was focused entirely on the stream bank ahead when the attack came from his right side. The tiger exploded from the shallow water barely 10 feet away, covering the distance in 2 enormous bounds. Qadir had no time to turn his rifle before the full weight of a large male tiger slammed into him. The impact knocked Qadir backward into the shallow water near the boat's edge. The tiger's jaws clamped around his throat and right shoulder, the crushing pressure fracturing his collarbone instantly. Qadir's rifle discharged once as it flew from his hands, the bullet striking harmlessly into the canopy. His scream was cut short as the tiger's bite closed off his airway. Rashid scrambled to the opposite end of the boat, unable to reach the rifle now floating several feet away. The boat rocked violently as the tiger maintained its grip, pulling Qadir deeper into the tidal channel. The animal's massive weight dragged them both into water approximately 4 feet deep, where the muddy bottom and tangled roots made escape impossible. The tiger maintained the suffocating throat hold as it dragged Qadir through the shallow water, keeping him pinned beneath the surface. Qadir's struggles weakened over the next several seconds as the combination of the crushing bite and submersion took effect. His movements ceased as drowning and suffocation ended his life. The tiger held on for several more seconds before releasing the body, which settled partially submerged among the tangled mangrove roots nearby. The tiger turned briefly toward Rashid, who remained frozen at the far end of the boat, barely breathing, before disappearing back into the mangrove forest as silently as it had appeared. The entire attack had lasted less than 45 seconds. Rashid remained motionless for nearly 10 minutes before carefully retrieving the oars and paddling frantically toward open water, abandoning both the rifle and his partner's body to the swamp. Authorities recovered partial remains 2 days later after Rashid's anonymous report led investigators to the approximate location. Recovery was difficult in the tidal mangrove system, where currents, crocodiles, and scavengers had disturbed the scene considerably. The investigation revealed the poaching operation through equipment recovered nearby. Rashid was never formally charged, as he had fled across the border into India immediately after the incident. The tiger was never located. Despite increased ranger patrols, the vast mangrove system, spanning thousands of square miles of near-identical tidal channels, made tracking any individual animal effectively impossible. Tiger attacks on people working illegally in the forest were periodically reported throughout the region. It was October 14, 2016, in the remote wilderness of Gallatin National Forest, Montana, where towering pines cast long shadows across rugged terrain that had remained unchanged for centuries. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of pine needles and the distant promise of winter, while golden aspen leaves danced in the mountain breeze like nature's confetti. This was prime elk country, where experienced hunters came to test their skills against one of North America's most challenging game animals in some of the most unforgiving wilderness on the continent, far from civilization's safety net. Drexel Pomp, a 42-year-old diesel mechanic and a hunter from Wyoming, had been making this annual pilgrimage for 6 consecutive seasons, alongside his hunting partners, Todd Renshaw, a 45-year-old electrician, and Clay Morton, a 39-year-old warehouse supervisor. The trio had developed an almost ritualistic approach to their Montana elk hunts, carefully scouting the same drainage system year after year with methodical precision. Drexel's weathered hands and keen eye for tracking had earned him respect among his peers as a skilled bow hunter who understood the mountains intimately and could read animal sign with remarkable accuracy. However, 2016 presented unusual challenges that would test even experienced hunters like Drexel and his companions. The summer's poor berry crop had forced grizzly bears to seek alternative food sources, making them more defensive around food caches as they desperately prepared for winter hibernation. Fresh claw marks scarred nearby trees like territorial warnings, and overturned logs revealed the telltale signs of bears foraging for sustenance before winter's arrival. Despite these warnings scattered throughout their hunting area, the hunters remained committed to their chosen hunting ground, drawn by the promise of trophy elk in this secluded basin where few other hunters ventured. 300 yards from their glassing ridge, they discovered a partially buried elk carcass, its remains hastily covered with dirt and brush, the unmistakable signature of a grizzly bear's food cache that would soon become a death trap. Grizzly bears are among North America's most formidable animals, capable of reaching speeds of 35 miles per hour and possessing bite forces exceeding 1,200 pounds per square inch that can crush bone. These massive omnivores, weighing up to 800 pounds, become extremely territorial when defending cached food sources, viewing any intrusion as a direct threat and reacting with explosive defensive aggression. Their powerful claws, measuring up to 4 inches long, can tear through flesh with devastating efficiency. Drexel made the fatal decision to approach the carcass alone, leaving his bear spray attached to his backpack rather than mounting it on his chest for immediate access. As he stepped within 20 yards of the cache, breaking the invisible boundary of safety, a massive grizzly exploded from the surrounding brush, covering the distance in seconds in a defensive charge meant to drive away the perceived threat. The bear's initial charge knocked Drexel to the ground with devastating force. Its powerful forelimbs struck him like a sledgehammer, followed immediately by razor-sharp claws that tore through the soft tissue on the left side of his face, exposing bone beneath torn flesh. The grizzly's massive jaws clamped down across his face and jaw, fracturing facial bones with sickening precision. The bear shifted its grip during the mauling, its teeth tearing deeper through muscle while its weight pinned Drexel helplessly against the ground. Severe facial trauma ruptured major blood vessels along the neck, including damage near the carotid and jugular, while repeated blows from the bear's forelimbs drove his head violently against the rocky soil. Blood quickly filled his airway as swelling and trauma compromised his breathing, and the relentless assault caused severe, blunt cranial trauma that left him rapidly losing consciousness. Even after the attack slowed, the damage had already been catastrophic. Within the next minute or two, massive blood loss and airway compromise caused Drexel to collapse, his body no longer able to sustain the trauma inflicted during the violent defensive encounter. Only when Drexel's body went completely still did the grizzly finally disengage, disappearing back into the wilderness as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind only silence and tragedy. Investigators later concluded the death likely resulted from catastrophic blood loss, airway obstruction, and blunt head trauma sustained during the mauling, transforming a routine hunting expedition into a nightmare that would haunt his companions forever. Authorities launched an immediate investigation, ultimately determining the attack was a defensive response to perceived threat near a food cache. The incident sent shockwaves through the hunting community, prompting renewed discussions about bear safety protocols in grizzly country and proper food cache identification techniques. It was September 2016 at the Umgeni River estuary, where murky freshwater collided with the Indian Ocean along the coast of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. Heavy rainfall had pounded the region for 3 days, swelling the river and pushing massive volumes of sediment-laden water into the coastal zone. The runoff carried organic matter and disoriented baitfish, creating a feeding opportunity that drew predators from deeper offshore waters into the shallow estuary mouth. The water was turbid brown-green, visibility reduced to mere inches in the churning mixture of fresh and salt water. As the sun descended toward the horizon, fading light further compromised visibility. Waves broke irregularly across the sandbar where current met incoming swells. Mara Knight was 28, a fitness trainer who spent her free time spearfishing along the South African coast. She had been diving recreationally for several years and considered herself competent in reading ocean conditions. That afternoon, she arrived at the estuary with 2 friends who shared her enthusiasm for spearfishing. The post-storm conditions had concentrated fish in the shallows, and despite poor visibility, the group decided to take advantage of the unusual activity. Her companions remained closer to shore while Mara ventured toward the estuary mouth, where the current was stronger and the water deeper. The decision to dive at dusk following a major storm represented a convergence of risk factors that experienced ocean users typically avoid. Estuaries are natural highways for sharks moving between offshore and inshore feeding zones, and bull sharks in particular exploit these transitional environments. The reduced salinity does not deter them. They are among the few shark species capable of tolerating brackish and freshwater conditions. The turbidity eliminated the primary advantage humans have underwater, the ability to see threats approaching. Mara continued working the channel edge, her spear gun loaded, a stringer of bleeding fish secured to her weight belt. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous predators in coastal waters, ranking behind only great white and tiger sharks in recorded attacks on humans. They are stocky, aggressive, and opportunistic, reaching lengths of 11 feet and weights exceeding 500 pounds. Unlike many shark species that prefer clear water and specific prey, bull sharks thrive in murky environments where their electroreceptive senses compensate for limited visibility. They hunt by detecting electrical impulses generated by muscle contractions and can locate struggling or injured prey from considerable distances. Their bite force exceeds 1,200 pounds per square inch, and their teeth are designed to grip and tear rather than slice cleanly. Bull sharks typically deliver a single forceful bite, driven by sensory confusion, then disengage upon recognizing unfamiliar prey. Mara tracked a small grouper along the sandy bottom near the channel edge, the water depth approximately 12 feet. The current pushed against her as she descended, equalizing pressure and scanning the limited visibility ahead. Her finger rested near the trigger of the loaded spear gun as she maneuvered through the surge. In the murky water, she failed to detect a large shape moving parallel to her position. Her trailing spear line snagged momentarily on a submerged obstacle, jerking the gun forward just as her finger made contact with the trigger. The spear discharged into the turbid water, striking a massive bull shark that had approached from her blind side. The spear penetrated the thick hide but lodged only superficially along the flank. The wound was non-lethal, but the sudden pain triggered an immediate defensive response. The shark had been drawn by the scent of blood from the fish on Mara's stringer and the electrical signals of her movements. The impact transformed the situation from investigative approach to direct confrontation. The shark turned abruptly, its body language shifting from exploratory to aggressive. Rather than retreating to the surface and exiting the water immediately, Mara attempted to retrieve the spear, reaching toward the trailing line. The bull shark accelerated from deeper water with explosive speed, closing the distance in seconds. The attack was a single, devastating strike aimed at the lower body. The jaws opened wide, revealing rows of serrated triangular teeth, and clamped down with crushing force across the upper thigh and hip junction. The bite likely severed or catastrophically damaged the femoral artery, along with other major blood vessels, tearing through massive sections of muscle tissue and connective structures. The teeth penetrated deep into the thigh and hip region, causing devastating injury to blood vessels, nerves, and bone. The shark released almost immediately after the initial bite, veering away as surface activity increased and the water filled with blood. Bull sharks typically do not sustain attacks on humans. They bite once to assess whether the target is suitable prey, then disengage when they recognize the unfamiliar composition. But the damage from that single bite was irreversible. Blood poured from the wound in pulsing streams, the compromised femoral artery pumping the body's entire volume into the surrounding water within minutes. Mara surfaced briefly, the buoyancy of her wetsuit bringing her to the top, but the massive blood loss had already begun shutting down vital systems. Her companions saw the disturbance and began moving toward her position, but the distance and current worked against them. Consciousness faded rapidly as blood pressure dropped to unsustainable levels. The body's compensatory mechanisms attempted to redirect remaining blood to vital organs, but the volume loss was too severe and too rapid. Within minutes of the bite, circulatory collapse followed. Mara's body drifted with the outgoing tide, the current carrying her toward deeper water before her friends could reach her. The entire sequence from strike to loss of vital function likely unfolded within just a few minutes. The cause of death was massive hemorrhage resulting from a single catastrophic bite that severed or catastrophically damaged major blood vessels in the lower body. Emergency services were contacted immediately, and a rescue boat launched from the nearby harbor. Mara's body was recovered approximately 20 minutes after the attack, but resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful due to the extent of blood loss. The beach was closed for 72 hours, while authorities assessed the situation and monitored for continued shark presence in the estuary. An investigation by the Regional Marine Safety Board confirmed the attack was consistent with bull shark behavior in post-storm conditions with poor visibility and speared fish present. Mara's family requested no retaliatory action against sharks. The spearfishing community responded with heightened awareness of diving dangers in turbid water during dawn and dusk, and local dive operators began emphasizing the importance of avoiding estuary mouths after heavy rainfall. It was September 14, 2016, when an experienced alligator hunter ventured deep into Louisiana's Atchafalaya Basin, one of America's largest and most dangerous swamplands. The vast wetland ecosystem stretched for miles in every direction, with towering bald cypress trees draped in Spanish moss, creating a cathedral-like canopy over the dark, tannic waters. Narrow channels wound through dense vegetation, creating a maze of waterways where visibility was limited and danger lurked beneath the surface. Spring breeding season had arrived, making the basin's massive alligator population more aggressive and territorial. Byron Vance, a 35-year-old oil rig worker from Louisiana, represented the third generation of his family to hunt alligators in these treacherous waters. With 15 years of experience navigating the swamp's hidden dangers, Byron was known for his willingness to pursue trophy-sized gators that other hunters avoided. His reputation for taking dangerous risks had earned him both respect and concern among fellow hunters. Byron preferred hunting alone to maximize profits from valuable hides. For 3 weeks, Byron had been tracking a legendary 14-foot male alligator that had eluded capture by multiple hunters over several seasons. Local hunters had warned him repeatedly about this particular animal's unusual size and aggressive behavior, noting that previous attempts to harvest it had resulted in close calls. The massive reptile had earned a fearsome reputation for attacking boats and displaying territorial behavior far beyond normal patterns. Despite these warnings, Byron remained determined to claim this ultimate trophy. American alligators are among North America's most formidable aquatic predators, with large males reaching lengths exceeding 14 feet and weights approaching 1,000 pounds. These ancient reptiles possess incredible bite force and lightning-fast reflexes. Alligators are perfectly adapted for their aquatic environment, capable of explosive bursts of speed both in water and on land. Their powerful tails serve as both propulsion and weapons, while their massive jaws contain rows of razor-sharp teeth designed for gripping and crushing prey. During breeding season, male alligators become extremely territorial and aggressive. The fatal mistake occurred when Byron spotted the massive 14-foot male basking in shallow water near cypress roots. Instead of using proper baiting techniques, he decided to approach the animal directly in 3-foot deep water. Byron fired a single .22 caliber shot aimed at the alligator's head, but the bullet struck at an angle and failed to penetrate the thick skull bone. The wounded alligator immediately slid off the muddy bank into the murky water and disappeared beneath the surface. Against all safety protocols, Byron waded 20 feet into the swamp to search for the injured animal. The dark water made visibility virtually impossible, while submerged logs created numerous hiding spots for the wounded predator. Byron moved slowly through the chest-deep water, unaware that the alligator had positioned itself directly beneath him. The 800-pound alligator erupted from the water with explosive force, launching its massive body upward at incredible speed. The surprise attack caught Byron completely off guard, as the predator's jaws clamped around his upper thigh with crushing force. The initial bite immediately severed the femoral artery and shattered the femur bone, causing massive trauma and instant blood loss. The alligator immediately initiated its signature death roll, spinning violently in the water while maintaining its grip on Byron's leg. The powerful rotation continued for 45 seconds, dislocating his hip and shoulder joints, while causing additional fractures. Byron was pulled underwater repeatedly during the spinning motion, forcing him to inhale swamp water. The alligator's grip shifted to Byron's torso, with its massive jaws crushing 3 ribs and puncturing his lung. The reptile's powerful tail repeatedly slapped Byron's body, causing severe blunt force trauma. Each impact drove him deeper underwater, making breathing impossible and accelerating his drowning. The attack continued for over 3 minutes. Death resulted from the combination of massive blood loss from the severed femoral artery, drowning from repeated submersion, and catastrophic internal injuries from the crushing bite force and death roll trauma. Following typical behavior, the massive reptile cached Byron's body underwater beneath a fallen cypress log. The animal remained in the area for several days, defending its kill from scavengers. Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries launched a search operation when Byron failed to return. Search teams discovered his abandoned boat within 24 hours after he failed to check in, leading to the recovery of his remains lodged beneath the cypress log. The condition of the body confirmed death by alligator attack. The incident prompted discussions about alligator hunting safety protocols. Byron's family struggled with the loss, particularly given his extensive experience. Wildlife officials emphasized that alligator attacks remained extremely rare, but noted that pursuing wounded animals dramatically increased risk.
August 26, 2024 began with a dry breeze curling through the Loliondo game-controlled area, just east of the Serengeti. The ground was brittle, grass burned gold by the late summer sun, and the tracks of zebra and lion pressed deep into the dust like scars. This was hunting country, legal, remote, and unforgiving. At sunrise, Malcolm Draycott stood at the front of the lead truck, scanning the plains as the convoy pushed forward. Everything felt in place, but in the bush, comfort is a warning, because the moment things seem safest is when they're about to go wrong. Malcolm was 44, a self-made man with a quiet intensity. He'd grown up outside Houston, the son of a machinist and a school secretary, and worked his way through oil rigs and construction crews until he built a company of his own. He sold it at 38 and walked away with more money than he could ever spend, then vanished from boardrooms and golf courses entirely. What came next was something he called earning a different kind of respect. He trained with professional guides, learned to track and shoot, and began traveling across southern Africa. His name was known in certain circles, not flashy, not loud, but remembered. He tipped well, followed rules, and didn't flinch when things got messy. Outfitters liked him, trackers trusted him, but underneath the calm was something harder. Malcolm didn't like leaving things undone. And when he set his sights on a lion, it wasn't about thrill, it was about completion. He treated the hunt like a business plan. Every angle covered, every risk accounted for. What he couldn't plan for was the lion he didn't see. By mid-morning, a young male lion was spotted resting in the open near a cluster of stones, his body stretched in the grass, mane tinged with shadow and age. Through his Leupold VX3i scope, Malcolm steadied his .375 H&H Magnum, drew in a slow breath, and fired. The crack of the shot startled a flock of birds into the air. The lion didn't flinch. He dropped immediately, a clean fall into the brush. The men nodded to each other. It looked perfect. But the savannah doesn't always give you what you see. Sometimes it gives you what you've forgotten to fear. They didn't know it yet, but the lion on the ground wasn't the alpha. It was a younger male, possibly subordinate, possibly trailing the real pride leader. And 40 feet away, obscured by waist-high grass and wind direction, the dominant male had been watching. Malcolm stepped from the vehicle with his rifle at his side and a practiced ease in his walk. He moved slowly, savoring the moment, and stopped just beside the lion's body to nudge the mane with his boot. The guides moved to set up the camera. A few paces back, the trackers stayed alert, though the kill looked routine. Malcolm crouched low to inspect the shot placement, muttering something under his breath, and reached forward to lift the lion's heavy head for a photograph. That's when the second lion struck. There was no growl, no sound at all, just a rush of motion as the hidden alpha burst from the grass at full speed. It hit Malcolm sideways, a blur of fur and muscle slamming into him like a battering ram. The force knocked him completely off his feet. His rifle flew from his grip and clattered against a nearby rock. The lion's jaws closed around Malcolm's neck and shoulder as it dragged him backwards through the dust, shaking him once, then again with terrifying force. His body jerked violently, boots scraping the ground, arms flailing in a brief, stunned attempt to fight back. The guides froze in shock for a heartbeat before scrambling for their rifles. One fired too quickly, the bullet kicking up dust behind the lion's flank. A second round found its mark, grazing the animal's ribcage. The lion didn't let go. It planted one massive paw across Malcolm's chest and drove its teeth deeper, crushing vertebrae and artery alike. Blood sprayed across the grass in dark arcs as Malcolm's body convulsed once, then went slack. A third shot rang out, this time punching through the lion's side. It staggered, snarled, and finally released its grip. The animal collapsed nearby, muscles twitching, blood seeping into the soil as it died facing the body of the man it had just killed. The aftermath was sudden and grim. The trackers, still shaken from the gunfire, scrambled forward and found Malcolm's body sprawled near the carcass of the first lion. His torso was torn open, neck punctured deep, and blood soaked through his shirt into the dust below. His eyes were still open, glazed in shock. His right hand, outstretched toward where the rifle had landed, remained curled as if trying to reach for it even in his last breath. There was no triumphant photo, no moment of pride, only chaos. One of the guides radioed for emergency evacuation, though it was more for protocol than hope. The closest ranger outpost was nearly an hour away, and no one doubted what the outcome would be. They wrapped his remains in a canvas tarp and laid him gently in the bed of the truck. The other lion, the one that had attacked, had already collapsed a few yards away, shot through the ribs by one of the clients, still trembling with disbelief. Malcolm's death was ruled a fatal wildlife incident. Local authorities confirmed the hunt had been legal with all permits intact. No charges were filed, but the hunting company quietly revised its protocols. No more photo ops until the scene was cleared, no more assumptions about lone predators. The party returned to camp in silence, and no further hunts were conducted in that zone for the rest of the season. His remains were flown back to Texas and buried in a private ceremony, attended only by family and a handful of close hunting companions. The story never made headlines, but it didn't have to. Among professional guides and bush veterans, word spread fast. Not as gossip, but as a warning. The lion he shot had never been the threat. The real danger had waited, hidden in the grass, close enough to strike the moment the barrel dipped and the cameras came out. Malcolm had done everything right until the second he assumed he was alone.
It was March 14, 2016, when the moonless night provided perfect cover for three men crossing the border from Mozambique into South Africa. The dry winter season had left the bushveld parched and brown, with visibility reduced to mere feet in the thick African darkness. The private game reserve they targeted bordered Kruger National Park, an area known for its thriving rhino population and minimal security presence. Victor Ndlovu was a 38-year-old former mine worker from the village of Masingir, located just across the Mozambican border. The collapse of the local mining operation 3 years earlier had left him desperate to support his extended family of 11. The rhino horn trade offered money that legitimate work could never match. Victor had completed 7 successful poaching expeditions over the previous 18 months, building a reputation among syndicate operators as reliable. Accompanying Victor were cousins Ernesto Macamo, 29, and Paulo Macamo, 34. Ernesto served as the group's tracker, his bushcraft skills honed through years of subsistence hunting. Paulo carried a modified .458 Winchester Magnum, capable of dropping a rhino with a single well-placed shot. Each man would receive approximately $3,000 upon delivery of a horn to a middleman in Johannesburg. The trio crossed the border fence at approximately 11:30 p.m., navigating by GPS coordinates from an inside contact who had confirmed the location of a breeding pair of white rhinos that frequented a watering hole roughly 4 miles from the perimeter fence. The plan was straightforward: locate the rhinos, eliminate the animals, harvest the horns, and return to Mozambique before sunrise. Victor led the group through the dense Mopane woodland, their footsteps muffled by dried leaves covering the sandy soil. The men communicated through hand signals, maintaining complete silence until they located their target. The reserve's anti-poaching unit consisted of only 4 rangers covering over 15,000 acres, making comprehensive nighttime patrols virtually impossible. African lions represent the continent's apex terrestrial predator, with adult males reaching weights of 420 pounds and lengths exceeding 9 feet from nose to tail. These powerful carnivores possess exceptional night vision, approximately 6 times more sensitive than human eyes. Their hunting strategy relies on coordinated ambush tactics. A lion's bite force exceeds 650 pounds per square inch, capable of crushing bone and severing major blood vessels with devastating efficiency. During the dry season, prides concentrate near water sources, making watering holes particularly dangerous after dark. Based on tracks recovered at the scene, investigators determined the group had traveled approximately 2 miles before encountering fresh lion prints in the sandy soil. The prints indicated multiple animals moving in the same direction as the poachers were heading. Evidence suggested the men chose to continue regardless, likely confident that lions would avoid humans and that their firepower could discourage any curious predators. This assessment would prove fatally incorrect. A pride had been hunting along the same route that night, following a small herd of impala toward the watering hole. 6 lionesses and 2 subadult males were known to frequent the area during the dry season. The poachers had unknowingly walked directly into active hunting territory. What happened next was pieced together from physical evidence at the scene. At approximately 1:15 a.m., the pride attacked. The lead lioness struck Victor from behind, 400 pounds of muscle and claw driving him face first into the ground. His rifle discharged harmlessly into the air as it flew from his grasp. The gunshot split the night. Based on evidence at the scene, investigators believe the lioness released her initial grip momentarily, startled by the deafening blast. The rest of the pride scattered into the darkness as the sound echoed across the bushveld. Victor lay face down in the dirt, blood pooling from deep claw wounds across his back. But the lioness recovered quickly. Evidence showed she attacked again within seconds. Her powerful jaws clamped around Victor's throat, applying the crushing pressure that lions use to suffocate prey. Victor's struggles would have weakened rapidly as his airway collapsed. Paulo's body was found approximately 15 feet from his fallen rifle, suggesting he had attempted to raise the weapon before a second lioness intercepted him. Bite marks on his right arm indicated the crushing force had shattered bone, likely causing him to drop the heavy rifle. The fatal wounds were concentrated around his throat, consistent with suffocation. Ernesto's remains were discovered nearly 300 yards from the initial attack site, indicating he had attempted to flee. Track evidence showed a subadult male had pursued him. The impact had shattered 3 ribs, with bone fragments puncturing the right lung. The killing bite had targeted his head and face. He had suffocated over several minutes as blood filled his airways. The pride regrouped near Victor's body as the night settled back into silence. Evidence indicated they fed cautiously, likely made nervous by the earlier gunfire. They abandoned the remains well before dawn, retreating deeper into the bush. Reserve rangers discovered the scene at 7:30 a.m. after noting vulture activity in the area. The scattered equipment and weapons immediately identified the victims as poachers. Investigators recovered partial remains, eventually identifying the men through DNA comparison with family members in Mozambique. The investigation confirmed poaching intent through recovered weapons and butchering tools. Reserve management increased night patrol frequency following the incident.
It was August 19, 2013, and the waters off Cape Cod were alive with activity. Seals basked on the rocky outcroppings while fishing boats dotted the horizon, their crews working the rich waters that had sustained New England families for generations. But beneath the surface, ancient predators patrolled the depths, drawn by the abundance of prey in the warming summer waters. It was peak season for great white sharks, and experienced fishermen knew to be cautious. Marcus Delacroix had been working these waters his entire life, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather before him. At 29, he was the older of two brothers who ran a small commercial fishing operation out of Provincetown. Marcus had always been the more aggressive and competitive of the two, constantly pushing boundaries and taking risks that made his younger brother Antoine nervous. The Delacroix family had been fishing in the Cape Cod waters for 4 generations, building a reputation for hard work and seamless teamwork. But Marcus had always felt the need to prove himself as the superior fisherman, often taking unnecessary risks to land bigger catches or venture into more dangerous waters. His rivalry with Antoine was mostly good-natured, but it had intensified recently as both brothers struggled to make their fishing operation profitable. Their boat, a 32-foot commercial fishing vessel named Marie Claire after their grandmother, was well equipped for deep water fishing but not designed for hunting large predators. The brothers had been tracking a massive great white shark for several days, drawn by reports from other fishermen about an 18-foot male that had been seen feeding near the seal colonies. Great white sharks are apex predators that can reach lengths of over 20 feet and weigh more than 5,000 pounds. Their bite force exceeds 4,000 pounds per square inch, and their razor-sharp teeth are designed to tear through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. They're ambush predators that attack from below, using their incredible speed and power to deliver fatal strikes to unsuspecting prey. Marcus had convinced Antoine to anchor near a seal colony where great whites were known to hunt, despite his brother's protests about the danger. The area was notorious among local fishermen as a place where sharks gathered during feeding times, making it extremely hazardous for anyone foolish enough to enter the water. The massive shark had been circling their boat for over an hour, its dorsal fin cutting through the surface as it investigated the unusual presence in its hunting grounds. Marcus became increasingly excited as he watched the predator, seeing an opportunity to prove his superiority over Antoine once and for all. Against all common sense and maritime safety protocols, Marcus decided to enter the water with a harpoon. Antoine argued desperately with his brother, pointing out that their father would never have attempted such a reckless stunt. But Marcus was determined to prove that he was the better fisherman, the braver brother, the one who deserved to lead their family business. He donned his wetsuit and grabbed a heavy harpoon, ignoring Antoine's increasingly frantic protests. The water was clear but deceptively calm as Marcus slipped over the side of the boat. He could see the shark's massive form moving in the depths below, its powerful tail propelling it through the water with effortless grace. Marcus positioned himself near the surface, harpoon ready, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. The great white approached from directly below, using the sun's glare on the surface to mask its approach. Marcus never saw the attack coming. The shark's massive head broke the surface with explosive force, its jaws opening wide to reveal rows of triangular teeth. The first bite caught Marcus across the torso, the shark's teeth slicing through his wetsuit and into the flesh with surgical precision. Marcus screamed as the shark's jaws clamped down on his midsection, crushing ribs and puncturing organs with devastating force. His harpoon struck the shark's head but failed to penetrate deeply enough to cause serious damage. The wounded predator released him momentarily, blood from both hunter and prey mixing in the churning water. Antoine screamed from the boat, frantically trying to start the engine and maneuver closer to his brother, but the great white wasn't finished. The shark's predatory instincts had been fully triggered by the blood in the water and the struggling movements of its prey. It circled once and attacked again, this time with lethal precision. The second attack was devastating. The shark's jaws closed around Marcus's upper body, its teeth severing his arm and crushing his chest cavity. The force of the bite lifted Marcus partially out of the water before the shark pulled him under, beginning the violent shaking motion that great whites use to tear apart large prey. Marcus's body went limp as massive blood loss and trauma overwhelmed his system. The shark continued its attack for several more seconds before releasing what remained and disappearing into the depths. Antoine watched in horror as pieces of his brother's wetsuit and equipment floated to the surface, along with an expanding pool of blood that attracted other scavengers. Coast Guard rescue boats arrived within 30 minutes of Antoine's distress call, but there was nothing left to recover except fragments of Marcus's gear and his life jacket. The great white shark was never located, having returned to the depths to continue its ancient cycle of predation. An investigation by maritime authorities ruled Marcus's death an accident caused by reckless behavior in known shark-infested waters. No charges were filed, but the incident prompted increased safety warnings for fishermen working near seal colonies during shark season. Antoine continued operating the family fishing business alone, but he never again ventured into the waters where his brother had died. Marcus's funeral was attended by hundreds of fishermen and community members who remembered him as a skilled waterman whose competitive nature had ultimately cost him his life. The Delacroix family fishing operation continued under Antoine's leadership, but the rivalry that had driven Marcus to take such a fatal risk died with him in the waters off Cape Cod.
It was July 12, 2016, when the Congo River flowed broad and sluggish through the dense rainforest of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The dry season had reduced water levels slightly, exposing muddy banks where hippos hauled out during evening hours. For Etienne Mobotu, a 39-year-old commercial bushmeat hunter from Mbandaka, the hippopods represented valuable inventory for the illegal meat trade supplying restaurants across Kinshasa. Etienne had been hunting hippos for nearly 6 years, operating from a narrow wooden canoe with an outboard motor. The business supported his extended family and employed 2 assistants who handled butchering and transport. He had grown confident in his ability to judge distances and retreat times, perhaps too confident. This expedition targeted a pod of 8 hippos in a quiet tributary approximately 5 miles from the main river channel. The pod included several large adults and at least 2 calves. Their presence made the operation more dangerous, but indicated the adults would be reluctant to abandon the area. Etienne approached alone that afternoon, his assistant having remained at base camp. The canoe carried a modified rifle and enough fuel for rapid withdrawal. His plan was to target a large adult from approximately 50 feet, allowing enough distance to retreat before the pod could react. The tributary was narrow here, barely 60 feet across, with dense overhanging vegetation on both banks. The water was dark and opaque, revealing nothing of what lay beneath the surface. Hippopotamuses are among Africa's most dangerous large mammals, responsible for an estimated 500 human deaths annually. Adult bulls can weigh up to 4,000 pounds and are fiercely territorial, particularly in water. Despite their bulky appearance, hippos move with explosive speed and can outrun humans over short distances on land. Their massive jaws open to 150 degrees and deliver crushing bite force, capable of splintering bone and severing limbs. Etienne positioned his canoe approximately 60 feet from the pod, drifting upstream to minimize engine noise. The hippos were partially submerged, only their eyes and ears visible above the waterline, watching him with an unblinking stillness that should have served as warning. He identified a large bull positioned slightly away from the others and raised his rifle to take the shot. The rifle's report echoed across the water as the bullet struck the bull in the shoulder area, but the angle caused the round to deflect off the massive shoulder blade rather than penetrating the chest cavity. The bull bellowed in pain, lunging upward. The rest of the pod erupted into motion, their defensive instincts triggered by the gunshot and their companion's distress. Etienne immediately started the outboard motor, attempting to turn downstream, but the wounded bull reacted to the disturbance, the canoe now drifting between the animal and the deeper channel, and charged through the water with shocking speed, closing the distance within seconds, its massive bulk creating a bow wave that rocked the canoe violently. The hippo rammed the canoe from below, its enormous head striking the hull with enough force to flip the craft sideways. Etienne was thrown into the water, his rifle clattering beneath the surface. Before he could orient himself, the hippo's jaws clamped onto the hull, splintering the craft with a single crushing bite. Etienne surfaced, gasping directly beside the enraged bull, attempting to swim toward the nearest bank 40 feet away, but the bull was already repositioning. The massive jaws found Etienne as he tried to swim clear. The bull bit down on his torso, fracturing ribs and driving bone fragments into both lungs. The hippo tossed him sideways with a violent shake of its head, then lunged forward and bit down again. Etienne's scream was cut short as blood filled his airways. The hippo released and submerged after the second bite. Etienne floated face down, his body going into shock from the catastrophic injuries. Blood spread across the water's surface as the current carried him downstream. He gradually lost consciousness over the next 30 seconds or so, drowning before internal bleeding could complete what the crushing bites had started. The pod remained agitated for several minutes before gradually settling. Etienne's body was recovered 3 days later, snagged on submerged branches approximately 2 miles downstream. Authorities identified his bushmeat operation through evidence at his base camp, though no charges could be filed given his death. The hippo pod remained in the tributary, but the wounded bull's shoulder wound became severely infected over the following weeks. Local fishermen reported the animal behaving erratically and charging boats unprovoked. A group of hunters from Etienne's network eventually tracked and killed the bull roughly a month after the attack, butchering the carcass for the same meat trade Etienne had supplied. It was November 3, 2018, high in the rugged San Juan Mountains of Colorado, where jagged peaks pierced the sky and ancient forests clung to steep slopes that had remained unchanged for millennia. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of pine and the promise of winter, while golden aspen leaves carpeted the forest floor like nature's warning of the harsh season ahead. This was prime mule deer country, where experienced hunters came to test their skills against one of North America's most challenging game animals in terrain that demanded both physical endurance and unwavering vigilance. Babbitt Glint, a 29-year-old wildlife photographer turned hunter, had made the transition from capturing animals through a lens to pursuing them with bow and arrow. Her background in wildlife photography had given her an intimate understanding of animal behavior, but hunting presented entirely different challenges that required constant awareness of predator-prey dynamics. She had chosen to hunt solo in this remote section of the San Juans, drawn by reports of trophy mule deer bucks that frequented the high country during late season. Earlier that day, Babbitt had discovered a partially covered deer carcass hidden beneath brush and debris, the unmistakable signature of a large predator's cache. Mountain lions commonly store their kills under natural cover, returning repeatedly to feed over several days. Fresh tracks in the soft earth around the cache indicated recent activity, yet the allure of hunting in an area with abundant deer sign proved too tempting to abandon. The steep terrain and thick timber created perfect stalking conditions for both hunter and the apex predators that called these mountains home. As evening approached, Babbitt positioned herself on an exposed rock ledge that offered commanding views of the drainage below, unaware that her elevated position had made her visible to eyes that had been watching from above. Mountain lions are North America's most efficient stealth predators, capable of stalking prey with near-total silence across broken terrain. Large males can exceed 150 pounds in Colorado and possess the ability to leap vertically up to 15 feet and horizontally more than 30 feet in a single bound. Their retractable claws and powerful hindquarters make them perfectly adapted for ambush hunting, while keen eyesight and acute hearing allow them to detect subtle movement at distance. They prefer to attack from above or behind, using momentum and body weight to knock prey off balance before securing a suffocating bite to the throat or a crushing hold at the base of the skull. Babbitt made the fatal mistake of sitting on the exposed ledge with a blind rear angle, removing her backpack that contained her sidearm and placing it several feet away. Most critically, she failed to scan the elevated ridge behind her position, leaving herself completely vulnerable to an attack from above. The mountain lion had been stalking her movements for over an hour, positioning itself on the rocky outcrop directly above her location. The cat launched from the ridge above, covering the distance in a single silent leap that gave Babbitt almost no time to react. The impact of concentrated muscle and bone drove her forward off the ledge, sending both predator and prey tumbling down the rocky slope. Before she could orient herself, the mountain lion secured its killing grip around her throat with practiced precision. Its jaws clamped down with crushing force, canine teeth sinking deep into the musculature of her neck as the cat anchored with its hind claws. Rather than slicing cleanly through major vessels, the bite compressed the carotid arteries and jugular veins, cutting off blood flow to the brain while simultaneously collapsing her trachea. The pressure obstructed her airway and restricted cerebral circulation at the same time. Loss of consciousness from carotid compression can occur in seconds. Babbitt's movements became disorganized, then weak, as oxygen deprivation and reduced blood flow took effect. The lion maintained steady pressure, adjusting its grip to keep her pinned against the uneven ground and using its body weight to prevent escape. With her airway compromised and cerebral perfusion critically reduced, her resistance faded rapidly. The predator held fast until all movement ceased, relying on suffocation and vascular compression rather than catastrophic blood loss. Death resulted from asphyxia compounded by sustained carotid artery compression, a method consistent with how mountain lions dispatch large prey in the wild. Colorado Parks and Wildlife launched an investigation into the attack, while the hunting community expressed shock that such an incident could occur during daylight hours. The presence of the nearby deer cache explained the lion's defensive aggression, underscoring the risk of remaining near an active kill site during feeding cycles. Wildlife officials emphasized the importance of avoiding cached carcasses, maintaining 360-degree situational awareness, and keeping defensive tools immediately accessible in mountain lion habitat. It was September 22, 2017, when a marine biology graduate student prepared for what would become her final dive near the protected boundary waters of the Farallon Islands off California's coast. The waters surrounding this rocky archipelago were known for their treacherous conditions, with powerful currents, frigid temperatures, and limited visibility creating a challenging environment for even experienced divers. Dense fog banks rolled across the Pacific, reducing surface visibility to less than 100 yards. The area's nutrient-rich waters supported massive populations of marine life, including elephant seals whose rookeries dotted the nearby islands. These conditions that made the region a biological hotspot also attracted some of the ocean's most dangerous predators. Rosalinda Kane, a 31-year-old marine biology graduate student at UC Davis, had spent years studying shark behavior and was considered an expert free diver and spear fisherwoman. Her dissertation focused on white shark feeding patterns, and she had logged hundreds of hours in California's coastal waters. Known for pushing diving limits in dangerous locations, Rosalinda was confident in her ability to read shark behavior and avoid dangerous encounters. Her academic advisor had repeatedly warned against solo diving, especially during peak white shark season, but research deadlines and limited funding had forced her to work alone. On this particular morning, Rosalinda conducted an unsanctioned solo dive outside her approved research window, a decision she knew violated both university safety protocols and local access restrictions. She entered the waters near the restricted Farallon Islands area, targeting lingcod populations at depths of approximately 60 feet. Local charter boat captains had reported increased white shark activity in recent weeks, with multiple sightings near nearby seal colonies. The timing coincided with peak feeding season, when adult white sharks congregated in the area to hunt marine mammals. Despite these escalating warnings, Rosalinda proceeded with the dive, driven by mounting pressure to complete her research. Great white sharks are among the ocean's most formidable apex predators, with adult females reaching lengths of 18 feet or more. These massive predators possess rows of serrated teeth, designed for cutting through flesh and bone, combined with incredible bite force capable of crushing large prey. Great whites are ambush hunters, using their powerful tails to propel themselves at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour when attacking from below. Their acute senses allow them to detect electrical fields generated by struggling fish and the scent of blood from vast distances. During feeding season near seal colonies, these sharks become particularly aggressive and territorial. The fatal mistake occurred when Rosalinda successfully speared a 40-pound lingcod at 50 feet depth near a rocky outcropping. The wounded fish thrashed violently on her spear tip, creating both a blood trail and electrical distress signals that traveled through the water column. Instead of immediately surfacing with her catch, she remained at depth to secure the fish properly, unaware that these signals had attracted a large female white shark. The 18-foot female approached from below and behind, using the sun's angle and water clarity to mask her approach until she was within striking distance. Rosalinda spotted the shark's massive silhouette when it was approximately 20 feet away and ascending rapidly. She attempted an emergency ascent, dropping her spear and swimming toward the surface, but the shark accelerated to intercept her escape route. The shark's jaws opened to their full 4-foot width, revealing multiple rows of triangular serrated teeth as it struck Rosalinda's left leg and hip region. The initial bite delivered crushing force that immediately severed the femoral artery and shattered her hip bone. The shark's teeth tore through her wetsuit and deep into muscle and bone. The attack lasted approximately 8 seconds before the shark released its grip. Rosalinda was pulled down nearly 15 feet during the initial attack, with massive blood loss beginning immediately from the severed artery. After releasing her, the shark circled back more slowly, displaying investigative behavior rather than an immediate strike. Moments later, it delivered a second, far less controlled attack that struck her torso instead of releasing, its jaws penetrating her chest cavity and puncturing vital organs, including her lung and heart. The catastrophic trauma created an even larger blood trail in the water, further escalating the shark's predatory behavior. The combination of catastrophic blood loss, organ damage, and water inhalation led to rapid incapacitation. Rosalinda lost consciousness within 90 seconds of the initial attack. Death occurred from exsanguination and drowning at a 45-foot depth, her body sinking toward the rocky bottom, where it remained until recovery crews located her several hours later. The Coast Guard discovered her remains 6 hours after she failed to return to shore, with her dive boat found anchored and empty. The recovery revealed extensive shark damage, with her left leg severed below the knee and massive trauma to her torso. The incident prompted investigations by university officials and marine safety authorities, who criticized the decision to dive alone in known shark habitat during peak season. Rosalinda's family struggled to understand how an experienced researcher could have made such a fatal error in judgment. The incident led to stricter safety protocols for graduate student research.
March 12, 2008 broke cool and still across the granite ridges of Matabo Hills in southern Zimbabwe. The sun was just beginning to warm the rock outcrops that jutted from the brush, ancient formations carved by time and wind into natural sentinels overlooking the valleys below. Baobab trees reached their twisted limbs skyward, and shadows lingered in the hollows where leopards liked to rest. This wasn't open savanna. It was closed country, tight, rocky, and perfect for ambush predators. And it was here that a 47-year-old man named Lennox Barad rose before dawn to prepare for the kind of hunt no one took lightly. Lennox had grown up in nearby Kezi, just east of the park boundary. He wasn't a trophy hunter nor a tourist. He was a seasoned bushman, a tracker, and a licensed hunter who often assisted the parks department when local wildlife grew too bold. Quiet and even-tempered, Lennox was well known in the region as a man who knew the land, and more importantly, the animals that lived on it. He'd hunted baboons that raided crops, warthogs that tore through fences, and on more than one occasion, problem leopards that had gotten too comfortable near the villages. His respect for the bush was hard-earned. He didn't brag, he didn't rush, but this time something had gone wrong. Over the past week, 3 goats had been taken from a small homestead just beyond the basalt ridge that separated the forest edge from cultivated fields. The signs were clear: claw marks, drag trails, and a half-eaten carcass left hanging in the fork of a tree. Only one animal did that. A call went out to Lennox. He arrived that afternoon with a small team, 2 junior trackers and a bolt-action Rigby rifle chambered in .275, ideal for the terrain. They set bait, mounted a hide, and waited. At dusk on the second day, movement stirred behind the thorn bush near the bait pile. Lennox raised the rifle and fired. The shot hit, but not cleanly. The leopard bolted into the rocks, a dark blur swallowed by stone and shadow. Blood drops dotted the trail. The trackers wanted to wait until morning, but Lennox insisted they follow. Time was critical. A wounded leopard didn't leave itself vulnerable. It doubled back, found cover, and waited. And when it struck, it didn't bluff, it went for the throat. The African leopard is not the largest of the big cats, but pound for pound, it's one of the most formidable. Adult males weigh between 130 and 200 pounds, but their muscular build allows them to haul prey twice their size into trees. Their retractable claws are razor sharp. Their bite force is nearly 700 psi, more than enough to sever tendons or crush windpipes. And unlike lions that often roar or posture before charging, leopards strike in silence. In rocky terrain like Matabo, they're nearly invisible until they move. Lennox followed the blood trail past a collapsed gully and into a thicket of jumbled rocks and scrub. The trail turned sharply up a slope where granite boulders stacked like stairs beneath a steep overhang. The cat was nowhere in sight. He stepped forward slowly, eyes scanning the brush ahead. Behind him, the trackers fanned out in a cautious arc, rifles raised. No one saw what waited above. The leopard had doubled back and climbed into a ledge hidden by sun and shadow. It was bleeding heavily from the haunches, but alive, barely, and full of adrenaline. As Lennox passed beneath, it dropped. It landed hard, its full weight slamming into Lennox's back with the force of a dropped boulder. The leopard's jaws locked instantly onto the base of his neck, teeth diving into muscle and artery in one crushing bite. The two tumbled downslope in a chaotic blur of claws, dust, and broken bush. As they rolled, the impact cracked one of Lennox's ribs and drove the breath from his lungs. He hit the ground with a wet thud, stunned but conscious, and reached for his rifle with fingers already slick with blood. The barrel scraped rock as he tried to lift it, but the cat was already on top of him again. Its claws tore into his shoulder and raked down across his ribcage, leaving open flesh in their wake. Lennox kicked, twisted, fought, but his body was losing strength by the second. Blood pooled quickly in the dust beneath him, and the leopard, driven by pain and instinct, shook him once, twice, then let go. A shout rang out from the rocks above. The trackers, panicked and out of position, fired warning shots into the air to try and scare the cat. But it didn't bolt. It limped a few steps away, growled low and hoarse, and collapsed near the roots of a stone fig tree, its chest heaving with the final effort of a dying predator that had made sure not to die alone. The recovery was frantic and desperate. The trackers scrambled downslope through thorn and loose stone, rifles still raised as they approached the blood-darkened clearing. They reached Lennox within seconds, but the scene was already still. His eyes were glassy, his mouth slightly open, and his body limp against the dirt. One man pressed fingers to his neck and whispered something, but there was no pulse. The artery had been severed cleanly. Blood loss had been rapid and total, less than a minute, and nothing more could be done. There was no time for grief. The men moved quickly, wrapping Lennox's body in a canvas poncho and lashing together a makeshift litter of mopane branches to carry him down the ridge. The leopard's body was found a short distance away, already stiff, sprawled against the rocks in a final sprawl of exertion. Its original wound had torn through the hindquarters and bled it out slowly, but not before it had turned back for a last strike. The animal was photographed, tagged for official records, and retrieved later by wildlife authorities. In the weeks that followed, no mount was requested, no hide was displayed. Lennox's death was classified as a fatal wildlife incident, and the investigation confirmed everything had been done by the book. But policy changed. No more solo tracking within ambush terrain. No more pursuit of injured predators without perimeter control. His funeral was held 3 days later beneath the shade of a mopane tree near his family's home. Neighbors came in from across the district, many on foot, to pay their respects. No one spoke loudly, no one called it bad luck. They called it what it was: the price of underestimating an animal that had made silence its greatest weapon. For all his skill and experience, Lennox had made one critical mistake. He looked ahead but not above. And in that high country of rocks and dust, that was all it took.
It was September 18, 2017, when the first autumn frost settled over the remote valleys of British Columbia's coast mountains. The salmon runs were winding down, leaving grizzly bears scrambling to accumulate fat reserves for hibernation. This period of hyperphagia made the animals both predictable and dangerous. Ivan Kozlov was a 47-year-old commercial fisherman based out of Prince Rupert, whose seasonal income had declined steadily as salmon stocks collapsed. The Russian immigrant had arrived in Canada 15 years earlier, building a modest life around commercial fishing that was now failing. Kozlov had discovered an alternative revenue stream through illegal wildlife trade, specifically the harvest of bear gallbladders for export to Asian traditional medicine markets. Bear gallbladders commanded extraordinary prices, fetching between $3,000 and $5,000 through the right connections. Over 3 years, Kozlov had killed approximately 15 black bears for their gallbladders, operating in remote areas where conservation officer presence was minimal. The transition to grizzly bears represented an escalation in both risk and potential reward. Kozlov's partner was 39-year-old Yuri Petrov, a fellow Russian immigrant who worked sporadically in the logging industry. Petrov had accompanied Kozlov on several previous hunts, demonstrating adequate skill with firearms and a willingness to participate in illegal activities. The target area was a remote salmon stream approximately 40 miles from the nearest maintained road, accessible only through dense coastal rainforest. The men had established a primitive camp 2 days earlier, observing bear activity and identifying several large grizzlies. Grizzly bears represent North America's most powerful terrestrial predator, with adult males commonly exceeding 800 pounds and reaching heights of 7 feet when standing upright. Their muscular structure and dense bone mass make them extraordinarily difficult to kill quickly. Grizzlies can sprint at speeds exceeding 35 miles per hour, covering short distances faster than any human can react. Their claws, measuring up to 4 inches, can cause devastating wounds with a single swipe, while their bite force exceeds 1,200 pounds per square inch. The morning began with heavy fog, reducing visibility to less than 50 feet along the stream corridor. Kozlov and Petrov took positions on opposite banks, approximately 100 yards apart. The first bear appeared at approximately 7:45 a.m., a large male moving along the stream bank directly toward Kozlov's position. The shot struck the bear in the shoulder area, but the angle caused the bullet to deflect off the dense shoulder blade rather than penetrating the chest cavity. The impact staggered the bear momentarily before pain and defensive rage overwhelmed any instinct to flee. 800 pounds of enraged grizzly charged directly toward the source of its pain. Kozlov attempted to chamber a second round, but the bolt handle slipped in his sweaty grip, costing precious seconds. The bear covered 40 yards in less than 3 seconds, its massive frame crashing through underbrush with terrifying speed. Kozlov managed to fire a second shot from the hip, but the round went wide. The initial impact knocked Kozlov off his feet, his rifle flying from his hands as the bear's momentum carried both of them to the ground. The grizzly bit down on Kozlov's shoulder and upper arm, the crushing force shattering his collarbone instantly. Kozlov screamed as the bear shook its head once, violently, then released. The bear stepped back momentarily, assessing whether the threat had been neutralized. Kozlov lay motionless, either from shock or instinct. But when Petrov's first shot cracked across the stream and struck the bear in the hindquarters, the animal spun toward this new threat, then back toward Kozlov. The sudden movement triggered the bear's defensive instincts again. The grizzly lunged forward and delivered a single devastating bite to Kozlov's head, its massive jaws closing around his skull with tremendous force. The damage was catastrophic and instant. Petrov's second shot hit the bear in the ribcage, and his third struck the spine. The grizzly collapsed immediately, its hindquarters paralyzed. The animal continued snapping and swiping for several seconds before blood loss caused it to go still. Kozlov had died from head trauma. The initial shoulder injuries, while severe, might have been survivable with immediate medical attention, but the final bite had caused damage incompatible with life. Petrov's satellite phone call to emergency services revealed their illegal activities. Police and conservation officers reached the scene via helicopter approximately 4 hours later. Petrov was arrested on multiple wildlife violations. eventually pleading guilty to charges resulting in substantial fines. The investigation revealed the extent of Kozlov's poaching operation through evidence recovered from his residence.
It was August 14, 2015, and the sun hung heavy over the rolling hills of Limpopo Province, South Africa. The air shimmered with heat waves rising from the red earth, and acacia trees dotted the landscape like ancient sentinels. This was big game country, where the line between hunter and hunted can shift in a heartbeat, and where respect for the wild wasn't just tradition, it was survival. Derek Matheson had flown in from Houston 3 days earlier, his custom rifle case and expensive gear marking him as another wealthy American seeking the ultimate trophy. At 42, Derek was an oil executive who had built his fortune on calculated risks and unwavering confidence. Back home in Texas, he was known for his weekend hunting trips, white-tailed deer, elk, the occasional wild boar. His trophy room was filled with mounted heads and framed photos of successful hunts. But Africa was different. Africa was where real hunters proved themselves. Derek had specifically requested a solo hunt. Group expeditions were for amateurs, he told the outfitter. He wanted to test his skills against dangerous game without the safety net of other hunters or the embarrassment of needing help. His professional hunting guide, the seasoned local named Thabo, had tried to discourage the solo approach, explaining that wounded, dangerous game required teamwork and backup. But Derek's money talked louder than Thabo's experience. The hunting concession sprawled across thousands of acres of pristine bushveld, home to the Big Five and countless other species. Lions in this region were particularly large and aggressive, having learned to avoid humans while maintaining their natural hunting instincts. The terrain was deceptive, open grassland that suddenly gave way to thick brush and rocky outcroppings, where a wounded animal could easily turn the tables on an overconfident hunter. African lions are apex predators weighing up to 420 pounds. Capable of reaching speeds of 50 miles per hour in short bursts. A male lion's bite force exceeds 650 pounds per square inch, strong enough to crush bone. When wounded, they become exponentially more dangerous, using their intelligence and remaining strength for one final devastating attack. They're known to circle back and ambush their pursuers, turning the hunt into a deadly game of cat and mouse. The morning had started well. Derek and Thabo had tracked a magnificent male lion to a clearing near a dried riverbed. The animal was massive, easily 400 pounds, with a full dark mane that marked him as a dominant male in his prime. Derek took his time, setting up the shot from 150 yards away. His first bullet struck the lion in the shoulder, a solid hit that should have been fatal. The lion roared, stumbled, and disappeared into a thicket of wait-a-bit thorns and dense brush. Thabo immediately called for patience. Standard protocol demanded waiting at least 30 minutes for a wounded, dangerous animal to weaken and die. But Derek was impatient. He'd made a good shot, he insisted. The lion was probably already dead. Against Thabo's strong protests, Derek grabbed his rifle and headed toward the thicket alone, determined to claim his trophy quickly. The brush was thick and visibility was limited to just a few yards in any direction. Derek pushed through the thorns, following drops of blood on the ground and broken branches where the lion had passed. He was focused entirely on the trail ahead, his rifle ready, confidence building with each step. What he didn't realize was that the wounded lion had used its last reserves of strength not to flee, but to circle back. The attack came from behind with explosive force. The lion had been lying in wait, using the thick cover to mask its position. Derek heard a low growl just as 400 pounds of wounded fury slammed into his back, driving him face first into the thorny ground. The lion's claws raked across his shoulders and neck as massive jaws clamped down on the back of his skull. Derek's rifle flew from his hands as he was driven into the dirt. The lion's bite crushed through bone and into brain tissue with devastating force. Derek's body convulsed once, then went limp. The lion held its grip for several more seconds before releasing him and staggering backward, blood from its own wound mixing with Derek's in the dust. The wounded lion managed only a few more steps before collapsing. Derek's bullet had done its job. The animal's lungs were punctured and it was bleeding internally. But it had used its final moments to exact a terrible price from the hunter who had pursued it so recklessly. Thabo found both bodies 20 minutes later. Derek lay motionless in the thorns, his skull crushed and his neck nearly severed by the lion's powerful jaws. The lion had died just yards away, its magnificent mane now matted with blood. The guide immediately radioed for help, but there was nothing anyone could do. An investigation by local authorities ruled the death accidental but preventable. Derek had violated basic hunting safety protocols by pursuing wounded, dangerous game alone. The hunting outfitter faced no charges but quietly updated their policies to require guides to physically restrain clients who attempted similar reckless behavior. Derek's body was flown back to Houston, where his funeral drew hundreds of mourners who remembered him as a successful businessman and devoted father, not as the overconfident hunter who had fatally underestimated his prey.
It was March 26, 2017, when the dry season had begun to parch the teak forests of central Myanmar. For the farming village of Kyokpadaung, the crop-raiding elephant problem had reached a crisis point. Over 3 months, a solitary bull elephant had destroyed nearly 40% of the community's rice crop, threatening food security for the entire region. Village elders had petitioned wildlife officials multiple times, but bureaucratic delays prevented intervention. Families were growing desperate. Thant Za was a 42-year-old farmer who had lost his entire season's crop to the elephant's raids. His desperation led him to accept an offer from the village cooperative to eliminate the animal using a borrowed rifle, despite having no experience with dangerous game. The village pooled money for ammunition and agreed to support Thant's family regardless of the outcome. They had been tracking the elephant for 3 days, following the destruction path through the forest bordering agricultural areas. Fresh tracks that morning indicated the bull was less than a mile ahead, likely resting in dense teak forest, where visibility was limited to barely 30 feet. Asian elephants can weigh between 6,000 and 11,000 pounds, with adult bulls being significantly larger. While generally less aggressive than African elephants, Asian elephants are responsible for over 500 human deaths annually, primarily through crop-raiding conflicts. Bull elephants experience must, a period of elevated testosterone that increases aggression dramatically. During must, temporal glands secrete fluid, and temperament becomes extremely volatile. A charging elephant can reach 25 miles per hour, and the impact of several tons at that velocity is invariably fatal. The 2 men located fresh dung indicating the elephant had passed through less than an hour earlier. The forest was eerily quiet, birds and monkeys having fled ahead of the massive animal. Thant carried the rifle while Kaya served as spotter. They communicated only in whispers, acutely aware that the animal could be anywhere around them. They moved another quarter mile when Kaya spotted the elephant through a gap in the trees. The bull was feeding on bamboo shoots, partially obscured by vegetation. Dark streaks of temporal gland secretion marked both sides of his head, clear evidence of must and peak aggression. Kaya gestured for Thant to stop, and both men crouched low, barely breathing. Thant raised the rifle, attempting to find a clear shot through dense foliage. Elephant anatomy requires precise shot placement, as vital organs are protected by massive bone and muscle. A shoulder shot targeting the heart and lungs offers the best chance, but the angle must be nearly perfect. Thant's shot was rushed and poorly aimed. The bullet struck the upper shoulder area but deflected off the massive shoulder blade, rather than penetrating to vital organs. The impact triggered an immediate response from the already volatile must bull. The elephant trumpeted in rage, immediately identifying the direction of the threat. The massive animal charged without hesitation, crashing through bamboo and teak saplings with terrifying momentum. The distance was barely 70 feet, giving Thant no time to chamber another round. Both men turned to flee, but running from a charging elephant in dense forest was futile. The elephant smashed through vegetation that would have stopped humans. Kaya managed to dive behind a massive teak trunk, the tree's girth providing momentary protection. Thant was not as fortunate. The elephant caught him after barely 40 feet, its speed and momentum making escape impossible. The bull's trunk lashed out, striking Thant across the back and sending him sprawling face first into the forest floor. Before Thant could rise, the elephant's front foot came down on his upper back and head with the full weight of nearly 5 tons. The crushing impact was catastrophic and instant, causing injuries incompatible with survival. Death was immediate. The elephant stepped forward, bringing its second front foot down on Thant's lower body. The animal then wheeled around, searching for additional threats, before spotting Kyle behind the tree. The bull circled the massive teak, trumpeting and investigating, but did not press the attack. After nearly a minute, the elephant turned and crashed away through the forest. Kyle remained hidden for over an hour before cautiously approaching. The trampling had left remains barely recognizable as human. His report brought villagers and wildlife officials to the scene later that day. Wildlife authorities assembled a tracking team to locate and destroy the bull elephant, but the animal had already moved deep into the surrounding forest. Trackers followed its trail for 3 days before losing the signs entirely in increasingly remote terrain. With limited resources, authorities were forced to abandon the effort. The elephant was never found. Village authorities implemented improved crop protection measures, including electric fencing, to prevent future conflicts. It was May 2018 in the Atchafalaya Basin floodway. A vast network of cypress-studded channels and flooded hardwood forests spanning nearly 1 million acres across south-central Louisiana. Recent heavy rains had pushed water levels higher than normal, transforming familiar hunting grounds into a maze of submerged vegetation and murky channels, where visibility beneath the surface rarely exceeded a few inches. The flooding had displaced countless animals, forcing them into compressed territories along narrow banks and shallow backwaters. Beneath the canopy of Spanish moss and tupelo trees, the slow-moving water concealed an ecosystem built on ambush and patience. The air hung thick with humidity, carrying the scent of decay and wet earth that permeated the entire basin. Benton Cole was 39 years old and had spent multiple seasons navigating these flooded bayous as a licensed nuisance alligator control contractor. His work required him to respond to landowner complaints about aggressive animals, particularly during nesting season, when territorial behavior intensified. Benton was efficient and methodical, preferring to work quickly and move on to the next site. He understood the risks inherent in close-range work with large reptiles, but years of experience had built a confidence grounded in routine. That morning, he and his partner had launched their aluminum skiff into a remote channel after receiving repeated complaints about a particularly large male alligator occupying a narrow stretch of water adjacent to an active nesting area, where females had recently constructed egg mounds. The landowner reported that the animal had been displaying heightened aggression, lunging at anything that approached the shoreline. Previous attempts to observe the animal had proven unsuccessful due to the dense vegetation. Peak nesting season had arrived, a period when female alligators construct massive mounds of vegetation to incubate their eggs, and males patrol nearby waters with zero tolerance for intrusion. The recent floods had only amplified this behavior, reducing visibility and forcing both humans and animals into tighter proximity than usual. Benton and his partner navigated slowly through the channel, scanning the banks for signs of disturbance. The water was the color of dark tea, stained by tannins and sediment, making it impossible to see more than a few inches below the surface. They located the reported nesting site along a muddy bank thick with reeds and submerged logs. The plan was straightforward: secure lines, assess the situation, and proceed with removal protocols if necessary. The American alligator is a prehistoric survivor, largely unchanged for millions of years, perfectly adapted to ambush hunting in freshwater environments. Adults can exceed 13 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds, with jaw muscles capable of delivering one of the strongest bite forces ever measured in a living animal. Unlike many predators that rely on pursuit, alligators employ explosive acceleration from concealment, using their powerful tails to propel themselves upward from beneath the surface. During nesting season, male alligators become fiercely territorial, defending established zones against any perceived threat. Their attacks are not acts of hunger but calculated responses to territorial violation. They strike without warning, relying on a combination of brute force, drowning tactics, and a behavior known as the death roll, a violent rotational spin used to subdue prey and tear flesh. The skiff idled alongside the muddy bank while Benton leaned forward over the gunwale, working to clear a line that had snagged on submerged vegetation. His partner maintained position, handling the throttle and watching the surrounding water. The turbidity was worse than anticipated. The water was completely opaque just inches below the surface. Rather than repositioning the boat or using extended tools, Benton made the decision to reach directly into the water near the nesting bank to free the tangled line. His hand penetrated the murk, fingers searching for the obstruction. What he could not see was the massive male positioned directly below, motionless and waiting. The alligator lunged upward with explosive force, jaws erupting through the surface and closing around Benton's forearm with crushing pressure. The strike was instantaneous, offering no opportunity for reaction or withdrawal. Teeth designed to grip rather than slice locked down, and the sheer momentum of the animal's upward trajectory pulled Benton off balance. His body pitched forward over the side of the skiff and into the channel. The water swallowed him immediately, the surface churning as the alligator initiated its primary killing behavior. The death roll began in a violent burst. The alligator rotated its entire body rapidly, turning Benton underwater in quick, disorienting spins. The animal completed several full rotations before pausing, its grip on his arm never weakening. During the pause, Benton remained submerged, held beneath the surface without opportunity to breathe. The sequence repeated, explosive rotations followed by prolonged submersion, then another burst of spinning. Each cycle prevented any chance to surface for air. As the animal turned during one rotation, Benton's trapped arm was wrenched against the submerged gunwale of the skiff. The combined force of his body weight, the alligator's torsion, and the rigid metal edge generating enough pressure to fracture bone. The structural damage was immediate and severe, separating tissue and dislocating joints as the rotations continued in intervals. The pattern persisted over several minutes. Between bursts of rolling, the alligator maintained its hold and kept Benton underwater, the continuous submersion preventing any intake of air. Water flooded his airway during the forced submersions, each pause driving him deeper into oxygen deprivation. His attempts to struggle diminished as consciousness began to fade, his movements becoming weaker with each cycle. The alligator showed no signs of releasing, its instincts governing the duration and intensity of the attack. The prolonged inability to breathe caused his body to eventually stop resisting altogether. Once resistance ceased, the grip loosened incrementally, the animal remaining close to the site rather than abandoning it. The cause of death was drowning, compounded by severe traumatic injuries sustained during the repeated death rolls and forced submersion. Benton's partner immediately activated emergency protocols, but the conditions made immediate intervention nearly impossible. The alligator remained in the vicinity of the nesting site, its defensive behavior unchanged. Recovery operations were delayed by visibility challenges and the confirmed presence of an actively aggressive animal. Area authorities temporarily restricted access to the section of the floodway, and wildlife officials conducted assessments of the site. The incident was classified as a territorial defense during peak nesting season, with environmental conditions contributing significantly to the outcome. Benton's family received notification within hours, and the contractor community throughout Louisiana responded with somber recognition of the inherent dangers present in floodwater work. Local news coverage emphasized the unpredictability of working in flooded environments during breeding periods, when even experienced professionals face elevated risks from animals defending reproductive territories. State wildlife agencies issued renewed warnings about approaching nesting sites during peak season, particularly in areas where flooding had compressed territorial boundaries. It was August 21st, 2017, along the murky waters of the Zambezi River in Zambia, where ancient currents carved through the African landscape, carrying secrets of countless predators lurking beneath the surface like living nightmares. The dawn air hung thick with humidity and the earthy scent of river mud, while reeds swayed gently in the morning breeze that carried whispers of danger across the water. Warning signs posted upstream served as grim reminders that these waters harbored some of Africa's most dangerous inhabitants. Yet the promise of exceptional waterfowl hunting continued to draw adventurous souls to these treacherous banks where death waited patiently. Lorraine Vex, a 34-year-old agricultural consultant from Namibia, had traveled to this remote section of the Zambezi with her husband Peter, a 38-year-old experienced duck hunter who knew these waters well and understood their reputation. The couple had planned this hunting expedition for months, drawn by reports of abundant waterfowl congregating along the reed-lined margins during the dry season when birds gathered in unprecedented numbers. However, the recent drought had dramatically altered the river's ecosystem, concentrating both prey and predators into increasingly smaller areas of remaining water, where competition for territory had reached deadly levels. Fresh slide marks scarred the muddy banks where massive reptiles had recently hauled themselves from the water, leaving behind evidence of their presence like signatures written in mud and terror. Experienced locals had warned that the dry season was forcing crocodiles into aggressive competition for territory, transforming previously safe hunting grounds into death traps. The shrinking channels meant that what had once been safe hunting grounds now teemed with concentrated populations of Nile crocodiles, each defending their diminishing domain with lethal determination. Despite these warnings, the Vex couple remained committed to their planned hunt, positioning themselves near a shallow reed bank where ducks typically gathered at first light. The morning hunt had proceeded successfully, with several birds falling to their skilled marksmanship as the sun climbed higher over the African wilderness, casting golden reflections across the deceptively calm water. Nile crocodiles are among Africa's most formidable apex predators, capable of remaining motionless underwater for up to an hour while waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike with explosive violence. These ancient killing machines can grow up to 20 feet in length and possess bite forces approaching 3,700 pounds per square inch, making them one of the most powerful predators on Earth, with jaws capable of crushing bone. Their hunting strategy relies on explosive ambush attacks from concealed positions, often targeting prey that ventures too close to the water's edge, where safety becomes an illusion. Lorraine made the fatal decision to wade into knee-deep water to retrieve a downed bird that had fallen among the reeds, breaking the cardinal rule of crocodile country. The couple had failed to scan the murky water for submerged movement, a critical oversight in crocodile-infested waters, where death lurked invisibly. As she bent forward to grasp the fallen duck, focusing on her prize rather than potential threats, a massive 14-foot Nile crocodile erupted from its submerged position with terrifying speed. The crocodile's powerful jaws clamped onto her lower leg with bone-crushing force that immediately fractured the tibia and fibula, snapping the bones like dry branches. Before Lorraine could react or comprehend what was happening, the massive reptile began pulling her toward deeper water with irresistible strength. Maintaining its grip on the shattered leg, the crocodile surged backward into deeper water, dragging her off balance and beneath the surface. Once submerged, the predator initiated its signature death roll, a violent rotational maneuver designed to disorient prey and cause devastating trauma while ensuring no escape was possible. The spinning motion violently twisted Lorraine's already broken leg as the crocodile rotated through the water, using the river itself as leverage to overpower her struggling body. During the rolling motion, the crocodile's grip shifted higher along her leg toward the upper thigh, where immense pressure from its jaws damaged major blood vessels while forcing her underwater. Water flooded into her lungs each time the reptile dragged her beneath the surface, while the violent spinning caused additional skeletal injuries and extreme disorientation. The relentless predator maintained its grip throughout the attack, demonstrating millions of years of evolutionary perfection in seconds. The attack ultimately proved fatal through forced submersion and catastrophic trauma, as Lorraine was repeatedly pulled underwater, while the crocodile's crushing bite prevented escape. The ancient killer then stored Lorraine's body beneath a submerged root structure, following its instinctual behavior of caching prey for later consumption. Zambian wildlife authorities launched an immediate investigation into the attack, while local communities expressed renewed concerns about crocodile populations along popular hunting areas. The incident highlighted the increasing dangers posed by concentrated predator populations during drought conditions, prompting discussions about enhanced safety protocols for river activities. It was October 15, 2016, when two hunters ventured into the remote wilderness of Kodiak Island, Alaska. The rugged terrain stretched endlessly with dense alder thickets and towering Sitka spruce trees, creating a maze of natural corridors. Autumn fog rolled across the mountainous landscape, reducing visibility to mere yards in some areas. The island's vast wilderness supported one of the highest densities of brown bears on Earth, making it a place where humans were merely visitors in a realm ruled by massive carnivores. Felix Williams, a 34-year-old construction foreman from Montana, had dreamed of this hunt for 3 years, saving every spare dollar for the expensive guided expedition. Known for his aggressive hunting style and overconfidence, Felix specialized in archery hunts and had insisted on bow hunting despite rifles being available, confident his skill would compensate for the risks. His reputation for pushing boundaries had earned him both respect and concern among fellow hunters. His companion, Wes Graham, was a 29-year-old accountant from Colorado who had limited big game experience but considerable financial resources. Wes had invested heavily in premium hunting equipment, hoping to impress his more experienced friend on what would be his first dangerous game hunt. The duo had hired a seasoned local guide who warned them repeatedly about a particular massive male bear that had been terrorizing the area. This legendary bear had charged other hunters twice before, displaying unusual aggression even for Kodiak standards. The guide emphasized patience and precision, stressing that wounded bears became extremely dangerous and often doubled back to attack their pursuers. Felix dismissed these warnings with characteristic arrogance, convinced his bow hunting skills would ensure a clean kill. Kodiak brown bears are among the largest predators on Earth, with adult males reaching weights exceeding 1,200 pounds. These animals possess incredible strength, with claws commonly measuring up to 4 inches in length and a crushing bite force. Kodiak bears can sprint at 35 miles per hour through dense vegetation and possess an acute sense of smell that can detect scents from miles away. Their thick hide and dense muscle mass make them incredibly difficult to kill, requiring precise shot placement to vital organs. When wounded, they become particularly aggressive, often circling back to ambush their attackers rather than fleeing. The fatal mistake occurred when Felix spotted the massive bear at 60 yards through a clearing and took a hasty shot without proper preparation. His broadhead arrow struck the bear's shoulder blade instead of penetrating the vital chest cavity behind the front leg. The wounded animal let out a thunderous roar that echoed across the valley before crashing through the brush, leaving a clear blood trail on fallen leaves and broken branches. When Felix moved to follow, the guide refused, warning that pursuing a wounded Kodiak bear on foot violated his safety protocols and the terms of the hunt. Despite being told he would abandon the expedition if they continued, both men chose to pursue the wounded bear alone into the alder thickets. The bear had circled back using game trails and positioned itself just 15 yards ahead in the dense vegetation, waiting in ambush. When Felix and Wes entered the thicket following the blood trail, the massive predator exploded from concealment at full speed. In under 2 seconds, it covered the distance with terrifying efficiency. Felix managed to release one more arrow that struck the bear's chest. The massive frame slammed into Felix with devastating force, razor-sharp claws raking across his torso. 4-inch claws tore through his heavy hunting jacket and ribcage, puncturing both lungs instantly and causing massive internal hemorrhaging. The bear's jaws clamped down on Felix's head and neck with crushing pressure, causing catastrophic cranial and cervical trauma. Wes reached desperately for the large-caliber rifle the guide had left with them against his better judgment, but the bear pivoted toward him before he could shoulder it. A powerful swipe caught Wes across the upper thigh, the claws opening the femoral region and causing severe vascular damage. As Wes fell backward onto the forest floor, the bear continued slashing his chest and forearms for nearly a minute while he attempted to bring his rifle up. Felix died within minutes from massive head trauma and chest injuries. Wes survived the brutal mauling but succumbed rapidly to blood loss from the severed femoral vessels. The bear remained in the vicinity for an extended period before finally departing the scene. Alaska State Troopers launched a comprehensive investigation into the incident, ultimately ruling it a hunting accident caused by pursuing a wounded dangerous animal without following established safety protocols. The men's families struggled with the devastating loss, particularly given that the attack could have been prevented by following basic hunting safety guidelines. The incident highlighted the extreme risks associated with bow hunting large predators in Alaska's unforgiving wilderness and sparked renewed discussions about hunting regulations in bear country.
September 16, 2022 dawned cold and crisp in Montana's Gallatin National Forest, where mist clung to the understory and the sharp scent of pine hung in the air like a warning. Elk rutting season was in full swing, and bugles echoed faintly through the ridges, low and urgent. Gallatin, part of the vast Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, is home to some of the most rugged terrain in the American West. Forest of lodgepole pine and Engelmann spruce laced with game trails and shaded hollows perfect for an ambush. Travis Longmore, 28 years old, knew the area well. He had hunted these woods before, but that day, in a stretch of unmarked timber above a shallow creek bed, something would go terribly wrong. Travis wasn't reckless. Raised in Idaho and based in Bozeman, he worked hard during the week and hunted hard when he could. He preferred bow hunting, closer, quieter, more personal. His compound bow, a Hoyt Carbon RX-3 equipped with Rage broadhead arrows, was tuned to perfection, and his pack was neatly organized down to the last wind checker bottle. Friends called him methodical, patient, the kind of guy who cleaned his gear twice and always left a detailed plan. That morning, he'd driven in before sunrise, parked off a remote fire road, and followed a game trail up through the pines. Around mid-morning, he caught sight of a large bull elk standing broadside near a grove of fir trees. The animal bugled once, turned, and paused just long enough. At 30 yards, Travis took the shot. The Rocky Mountain elk is the largest subspecies of elk in North America. Adult bulls regularly exceed 700 pounds, with racks spanning up to 4 feet wide and tines as long as knives. During the rut, they're high-strung and volatile, driven by instinct and surging testosterone. They'll battle rivals with brutal head-on charges, scatter branches in display of dominance, and, when wounded, can enter a final adrenal frenzy that turns even the dying into a deadly force. While most hunters respect the possibility in theory, few ever see it up close. Travis was about to. Following best practice, Travis waited 45 minutes before trailing. The blood trail was steady, rich, and bright red, likely a lung shot. He moved carefully through the brush, stepping over deadfall and ducking beneath low boughs. After nearly 200 yards of tracking, he found the bull lying near a fallen pine, its body slumped sideways and eyes dull. Blood had pooled beneath the animal's chest and its ribcage no longer rose. Travis approached, slowly at first, then confidently. He knocked his bow, lowered it, and stepped into the clearing. He drew out his phone to take a picture. The elk exploded upward. It surged to its feet in a single staggering motion, shoulders heaving, head swinging wide. The first antler caught Travis across the thigh, carving a long gash and sending him sideways. He staggered off balance as the bull turned and charged again. This time it hit full force. One tine drove into his abdomen, another beneath the collarbone. He screamed as he was lifted backwards and slammed against a nearby pine. The bark cracked behind him. He tried to push the elk off, grabbing wildly at its shoulder, but the weight was overwhelming. The bull wasn't striking clean, it was thrashing. Its body spasmed with the last tremors of life, muscles surging, legs kicking up debris as it crushed Travis against the tree. Another jab drove a tine deeper, this time between ribs. Blood soaked his jacket and pooled at his boots. He gasped once, then again weaker. A final lurch from the elk sent him sideways, collapsing into the dirt. The bull staggered, took 2 steps, and collapsed 5 feet away. Both of them lay still. When Travis missed his scheduled check-in window that evening, a friend called the local sheriff's office. A search party formed at first light. His truck was found parked where he'd left it, untouched. Following faint boot tracks and drag marks through the brush, they found the clearing by mid-afternoon. Travis's body was pinned awkwardly against a tree, blood dried into the pine bark. The elk lay nearby, dead at last, its antlers still coated with gore. His bow was buried beneath snapped branches, his phone was found face up in the soil, camera still open but never used. The autopsy confirmed massive internal trauma. 2 of the antler wounds had been independently fatal. The elk had died of its own injuries shortly after the attack, its lungs flooded with blood. Rangers posted a safety notice later that week, reminding hunters, never assume a downed animal is dead, especially when the shot is borderline and the terrain gives it cover. Travis was buried the following Saturday in Bozeman. The service was small, the kind hunters attend in silence. His story didn't make headlines, but across the hunting community it traveled fast, quietly, urgently, like a warning in the woods.
It was August 22nd, 2014, when the morning sun rose over a private hunting concession in Zimbabwe's Matabeleland North Province. The dry season had transformed the landscape into a golden expanse of dried grasses and scattered acacia trees. The concession operated as a trophy hunting operation, catering to wealthy international clients seeking Africa's dangerous game. Marcus Webb was a 52-year-old real estate developer from Houston, Texas, whose considerable wealth had funded hunting expeditions across 4 continents over the previous decade. His trophy room featured mounts from North American elk to Siberian brown bear. Webb had never hunted African dangerous game, but the allure of adding a Cape buffalo to his collection had proven irresistible. He had paid $42,000 for the 10-day safari package. Webb's hunting experience had been limited to guided situations with significant safety margins, and he had developed confidence that exceeded his actual skill level, a dangerous combination when facing animals capable of killing experienced professional hunters. The hunting concession operated under questionable ethical standards that Webb had chosen to overlook, maintaining semi-habituated buffalo herds that reduced the challenge significantly. Professional hunter Derek Botha, 44, had worked for the concession for 6 years, guiding dozens of similar clients to successful harvests. Tracker Samuel Moyo, 38, accompanied every expedition. Webb had arrived 3 days earlier, spending the initial period sighting in his rifle and taking several plains game animals. His shooting had been acceptable, though Botha had privately noted that Webb displayed poor trigger discipline and a tendency to rush his shots when excited. Cape buffalo rank among Africa's most dangerous animals, responsible for an estimated 200 human fatalities annually across the continent. Adult bulls weigh between 1,100 and 2,000 pounds, with heavily bossed horns capable of going through vital organs with devastating efficiency. Unlike many prey animals that flee when wounded, buffalo frequently circle back to ambush their pursuers. Their thick hide and dense bone structure make clean kills difficult. The hunting party located a bachelor group at approximately 8:30 a.m., identifying 4 bulls resting near a waterhole. Botha identified a mature bull with exceptional horn development as the primary target. The approach required crossing 300 yards of open ground with minimal cover. Botha positioned Webb behind a termite mound at approximately 120 yards from the resting bulls. The shot broke cleanly, but Webb's excitement caused him to pull slightly right. The 375 H&H bullet struck the bull in the gut rather than the vitals, penetrating the intestinal cavity without immediately incapacitating the animal. The wounded buffalo lurched to its feet and disappeared into thick Jesse bush before anyone could fire a follow-up shot. A gut-shot buffalo represented one of the most dangerous situations in African hunting. The blood trail led into increasingly dense cover, with visibility dropping to less than 15 feet. Botha took the lead, his double rifle loaded with solid bullets designed for maximum penetration. The buffalo had traveled approximately 200 yards before stopping, standing motionless in the shadows, waiting for pursuers it knew would follow. Botha detected the buffalo's position first at barely 20 yards. He began raising his rifle when the buffalo charged. The explosive acceleration covered the distance in less than 2 seconds. Botha managed to fire 1 barrel, the solid grazing the buffalo's boss at an angle and tearing a chunk from the heavy horn plate without penetrating the skull. The impact barely slowed the charge. The bull's right horn caught Botha in the left hip, lifting him off his feet and throwing him into the undergrowth. The horn tip had punctured deep into his upper thigh, severing major blood vessels. Botha lay motionless where he fell, blood pooling rapidly beneath him. The buffalo wheeled around, searching for additional threats. Webb had stumbled backward during the initial charge, his rifle unfired. He turned to run, but managed only a few steps before the buffalo spotted him. The second charge was shorter but equally devastating. The horn caught Webb in the lower back, the impact driving him face first into the dirt. The buffalo gored him twice more in quick succession, the horn penetrating his abdominal cavity and causing catastrophic internal damage. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the attack stopped. The buffalo stepped back, snorted once, and staggered into the bush. Its own injuries were beginning to take their toll. Moyo had retreated and remained hidden until the buffalo moved away. His radio call brought an emergency response within 40 minutes. Botha had lost consciousness within minutes of being gored, the severed blood vessels draining his circulatory system. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Webb had died from massive internal trauma, his wounds too severe to survive even with immediate medical attention. The wounded buffalo was tracked and dispatched later that afternoon, found collapsed half a mile from the attack site. Authorities investigated, ruling both deaths as hunting accidents without criminal liability. The concession suspended operations for 3 weeks before resuming with enhanced safety protocols. It was November 3, 2013, when the late spring heat shimmered across the scrublands of the Kalahari Desert in eastern Botswana. The dry season was ending, and wildlife had begun concentrating near scattered waterholes. For Darian Kumalo, a 45-year-old bow hunter from Johannesburg. This represented the culmination of 2 years of planning for his first African lion hunt. Darian had built his reputation pursuing dangerous game with archery equipment, considering rifle hunting unsporting. His collection included Cape buffalo and leopard taken with compound bow, and a lion would complete his dangerous game slam. He had paid $38,000 for the fully guided hunt in a private concession bordering a national park. The professional hunter was Nicholas Venter, a 52-year-old guide with 26 years of experience. Nicholas had guided over 40 lion hunts, though he privately questioned bow hunting for such dangerous game. The reduced lethality of arrows meant wounded animals were significantly more common, creating dangerous situations for everyone involved. He had expressed these concerns to Darian before the hunt, but the client had been dismissive. The hunting party had located a coalition of 3 male lions the previous afternoon, resting near a dry riverbed. Nicholas identified a mature male with a dark mane as the trophy animal. The approach was made from a ground blind near a bait site, the standard method for bow hunting dangerous game, where archery's reduced range required close proximity. Darian's first arrow struck the lion in the shoulder area, but the broadhead failed to reach vital organs. The lion bolted into dense acacia scrub, leaving a blood trail indicating a survivable wound. Nicholas insisted on a full 4-hour wait before tracking, allowing the wounded animal time to lie down and stiffen. Those hours passed slowly, the tension building as everyone understood what they would be walking into. African lions are apex predators with males weighing between 350 and 420 pounds. Wounded lions are extraordinarily dangerous, their aggression amplified by pain and defensive instincts. Unlike prey species that flee when injured, lions frequently adopt ambush positions, using dense cover to stage counterattacks against pursuers. Their powerful jaws can crush bone, and their claws inflict deep, tearing wounds. Lions have been documented circling behind tracking parties to launch attacks from unexpected angles. After the extended wait, Nicholas and Darian began following the blood trail on foot, with 2 trackers providing support. They moved slowly through dense thorn scrub, where visibility dropped to barely 20 feet. Nicholas carried a heavy caliber rifle as backup. Every few steps, the team paused to listen, for breathing, for the rustle of movement, for anything that might betray the lion's position. The blood trail led approximately 400 yards before the drops became less frequent, indicating the arrow had either fallen out or the wound was clotting. They had covered another 150 yards when the trackers located a spot where the lion had bedded down, the disturbed earth and blood indicating the animal had rested before moving on. The bed was still warm. What Nicholas couldn't know was that the wounded lion had heard the tracking party's approach and moved in a wide circle through the dense scrub. The lion's pain and defensive aggression had triggered its ambush instincts, and the animal now stalked its pursuers from barely 40 feet away, using the same cover that concealed it from its natural prey. Group had paused to reassess the trail when the lion launched its attack. The massive male burst from dense cover to Darian's left, covering the distance in 3 explosive bounds before anyone could react. Nicholas had been facing the opposite direction, his rifle pointed away from the threat. The lion's 400-pound body slammed into Darian, knocking him completely off his feet. He crashed to the ground as the lion's claws raked across his chest and shoulders, shredding through his hunting vest and opening deep gashes from collarbone to sternum. The lion's jaws closed on Darian's left shoulder and neck, fracturing his clavicle and severing major blood vessels. Nicholas spun and fired twice in rapid succession, both shots striking the lion in the ribcage and spine. The massive cat released its grip and collapsed sideways. The spinal hit paralyzed its hindquarters instantly, but the lion continued to thrash and snap with its forelegs and jaws for several more seconds before blood loss from the rifle wounds caused it to go still. Darian lay motionless, blood pouring from the devastating neck and shoulder wounds. The lion's bite had severed his carotid artery. He lost consciousness almost immediately, and despite Nicholas applying pressure while calling for emergency evacuation, Darian died within a minute. The blood loss was simply too massive and too rapid to survive. A chartered evacuation helicopter arrived within 40 minutes, but could only transport Darian's body and the lion back to camp. The investigation ruled it a hunting accident with no criminal charges. The Professional Hunting Association implemented stricter guidelines for bow hunting dangerous game, though the practice remained legal. Nicholas retired from professional hunting 6 months later. It was September 9th, 2015, in the dense hardwood forests of Pisgah National Forest, North Carolina, where ancient mountains rolled like green waves across the Appalachian landscape. The crisp autumn air carried the earthy scent of fallen leaves and the distant promise of changing seasons, while towering oaks and maples created a cathedral of golden canopy overhead. This was prime white-tailed deer country, where experienced hunters came to pursue one of the East Coast's most prized game animals in terrain that had witnessed countless hunting seasons. throughout generations of outdoor tradition. Moxon Dwale, a 37-year-old contractor from Tennessee, had traveled to these North Carolina mountains for his first hunting expedition in the region. Despite being an experienced hunter in his home state, Moxon was unfamiliar with the unique challenges presented by the Appalachian ecosystem during fall mast season. Earlier that morning, he had successfully harvested a mature whitetail buck, field dressing the animal approximately 200 yards from the main trail before leaving the gut pile in the traditional manner. However, this particular autumn presented unusual circumstances that Moxon could not have anticipated. The fall mast season had produced an abundant crop of acorns and nuts, drawing black bears into aggressive feeding patterns as they prepared for winter hibernation. Fresh bear tracks had been observed throughout the area, and experienced local hunters had noted increased bear activity around gut piles and carcasses. The combination of pre-winter feeding urgency and food defense behavior had made the region's black bear population more reactive than usual, transforming routine hunting practices into potentially deadly encounters. Moxon had left essential gear near the field dressing site and made the decision to return alone to retrieve his equipment, unaware that his gut pile had already attracted one of the forest's most powerful inhabitants. American black bears are North America's most widely distributed bear species, with adult males weighing up to 600 pounds and possessing surprising speed and agility. Despite their name, black bears can range in color from jet black to cinnamon brown, and they possess sharp curved claws capable of ripping through flesh with devastating efficiency. During fall feeding season, black bears enter hyperphagia, a biological state that drives them to consume massive quantities of calories before winter dormancy. Their bite force exceeds 800 pounds per square inch, and their forelimbs can deliver crushing blows strong enough to fracture bone. Moxon made the fatal mistake of returning to the gut pile alone, approaching from downwind where his scent did not carry ahead of him. Most critically, he failed to carry his firearm in a ready position, instead keeping it slung across his shoulder where rapid deployment would have been difficult in an emergency. As he neared the site, a large 300-pound black bear was actively feeding on the remains. The bear detected Moxon at close range and immediately perceived him as a threat to its food source. Black bears defending a carcass can react with sudden, explosive aggression when surprised. The animal charged from less than 20 yards away, covering the distance in seconds with startling speed that left virtually no time for effective defensive action. The bear's initial attack targeted Moxon's raised forearm as he instinctively brought his hands up to protect himself. Powerful jaws clamped down with crushing force, fracturing the radius and ulna, while teeth tore through muscle and connective tissue. The impact and forward momentum drove him to the ground, where he lost positional advantage. The bear then shifted its assault to the head and neck. Instead of a clean skull penetration, the bite crushed facial bones and caused severe cranial trauma. The force collapsed orbital structures and shattered the maxilla, while blunt compression transmitted through the skull produced traumatic brain injury. Simultaneously, the bear's jaws and forelimbs raked across the cervical region, compressing the airway and tearing deeply into the side of the neck. Critical blood vessels in the neck were lacerated during the mauling, resulting in rapid external hemorrhage. The combination of massive blood loss, airway compromise, and cervical trauma caused swift physiological collapse. Neurological function deteriorated rapidly as oxygen delivery to the brain was disrupted. The bear maintained its grip for several seconds, shaking violently in a predatory motion that compounded spinal and vascular damage. Struggles weakened almost immediately. With catastrophic neck injury and uncontrolled hemorrhaging, loss of consciousness occurred quickly, and death followed within a short span, consistent with severe exsanguination and traumatic brain injury. The attack itself unfolded in well under a minute, but the injuries inflicted, crushing facial fractures, cervical vessel damage, airway compromise, and blunt cranial trauma, were catastrophic and irreversible. Officials launched an immediate investigation into the fatal bear attack, while local hunting communities expressed shock at the incident's proximity to popular hunting areas. The investigation determined the bear had been defending an active food source, reinforcing long-standing wildlife guidance about avoiding gut piles during peak bear feeding periods. Officials reiterated the importance of maintaining situational awareness, carrying firearms in a ready configuration, and exercising extreme caution in bear habitat during hyperphagia season.
November 3rd, 2016, and winter was closing in on Yellowstone National Park. Snow dusted the high peaks while frost painted the meadows silver each morning. The park's famous geysers sent steam columns into the crisp air, and most wildlife was preparing for the harsh months ahead. It was a time when the wilderness felt especially wild, when even experienced outdoorsmen knew to tread carefully. Carl "Bulldog" Morrison had earned his nickname through years of stubborn persistence and a stocky build that made him look like he could bulldoze through any obstacle. At 51, he was an unemployed mechanic from Billings, Montana, whose luck had run out along with his savings. A series of bad decisions and worse investments had left him desperate for money, and he knew the black market value of bear parts could solve his immediate problems. Carl had been poaching illegally in protected areas for months, using his childhood knowledge of Yellowstone's backcountry to avoid rangers and tourists. He preferred working alone, fewer witnesses, no one to split profits with, and no one to question his increasingly risky decisions. His modified hunting rifle was unregistered, his camping gear was minimal, and his respect for park boundaries was non-existent. Grizzly bears in Yellowstone can weigh over 600 pounds and stand 8 feet tall on their hind legs. As winter approaches, they become increasingly aggressive about defending food sources and den sites. A grizzly's bite force exceeds 1,200 pounds per square inch, and their claws can grow up to 4 inches long. When protecting their winter territory, they will attack with devastating ferocity, viewing any intruder as a direct threat to their survival. Carl's morning had been successful. He'd managed to kill a smaller black bear near a berry patch, field dressing it quickly and hiding the valuable parts in his backpack. But success bred greed, and Carl decided to push his luck further. He'd been tracking a massive grizzly for over an hour, following claw marks on trees and massive paw prints in the soft earth. The grizzly's den was located in a natural cave beneath a rocky overhang, surrounded by thick brush and fallen logs. Carl approached carefully, his rifle ready, thinking he could catch the bear sleeping or at least off guard. What he didn't realize was that grizzlies are light sleepers, especially when strangers approach their winter sanctuary. The bear detected Carl's scent long before the poacher saw him, as Carl crept through the underbrush trying to get a clear shot at the den entrance. The grizzly was already moving. The massive animal emerged from the cave with surprising speed and silence, positioning itself between the intruder and its winter home. Carl finally spotted the bear when it was less than 30 yards away. He raised his rifle quickly, but the illegal weapon, poorly maintained and modified with cheap parts, misfired. The firing pin struck the primer, but the cartridge failed to ignite. Carl frantically worked the bolt, trying to chamber another round, but the grizzly was already charging. 600 pounds of muscle and fury covered the distance in seconds. The bear's first swipe knocked Carl's rifle from his hand and sent him sprawling backward into the brush. Massive claws raked across his chest, tearing through his jacket and into flesh. Carl screamed and tried to roll away, but the grizzly was on him instantly. The bear's jaws clamped down on Carl's shoulder, crushing bone and muscle with devastating force. Carl's arm went numb as tendons snapped and his shoulder blade cracked. The grizzly shook him like a rag doll before releasing him and striking again with its claws, opening deep gashes across his back and neck. Carl managed one final desperate attempt to crawl away, but the bear wasn't finished. It grabbed him by the leg and dragged him backward toward the den site, treating him like any other threat to its winter survival. The final attack crushed Carl's skull and severed his spinal cord. He died within minutes, his body going limp in the grizzly's jaws. Carl's body wasn't discovered until 3 weeks later, when park rangers conducting a routine patrol noticed his abandoned vehicle at an illegal camping spot. A search team with tracking dogs eventually located his remains, partially consumed and buried under debris the grizzly had constructed. The bear was never located or destroyed. Officials determined it had acted in natural defense of its territory. An investigation revealed Carl's history of wildlife violations and his connection to illegal wildlife trafficking. No charges were filed posthumously, but his death prompted increased patrols in remote areas of the park. Carl's funeral was small and quiet, attended mainly by family members who remembered him as a skilled mechanic who had lost his way.